And again, the 301, this form doesn't get used if you're using the 301. I mean, if you're using the first report of injury. Okay, so if you maintain those, it completely erases, you don't have to maintain this particular format, okay, or this form. So let's take a look at some of the sample forms, if we will. All right, so here's what I did. I made up a company, Buckman's Platforms. And so I'm out of Helena, Montana. This is my 2013 tracking because I'm still working on 14. So I'm still working on the 13. I mean, this is the one I had done. I get to decide my case number. So I put my case number in here, starting at 1 through whatever. You would not, if you think it's hard for you guys to track this stuff with actual cases, try and make up stuff. It gets a little bit more interesting in that process. So anyway, I had my employees' names. I actually had to go into the phone book trying to help find some folks here. Job title, date of injury, and the event that it occurred in, okay? So you can see here when you look at this, you can say, okay, so I had one office injury, I had a shipping dock, I had 2 shipping docks, I had 1 welding area and 1 assembly area. So when you go through there, this helps you do trend analysis. So you can kind of take a look at this and you can, at a glance, where do I have my problem at? Well, apparently something's going on with the shipping dock at this point because I have at least 2 injuries there, okay? You can see how I described the different body parts. So for Daniel here, he had his left wrist, carpal tunnel, and I put computer and driving. Now, if I had to do this over again, I would have put a slash by the office and put company vehicle, okay? So that it happened in both places. As he's driving, he messed up, you know, I don't know how you guys drive, but I have a tendency to rest my wrist on top of the steering wheel, and I found that that causes me pain. So I stopped doing that, but that's something that I documented here. For instance, Sarah Dixon, again, shipping dock, right arm broken, fall on a wet floor was my cause. So you can kind of go down here. The one I found interesting that I put in there was Fred Munson. He's a welder in the welding area. He ended up with a 3rd-degree burn on his, what was it, right hand? Right hand, but a 3rd-degree burn from arc welding. I give these guys PPE, you know, and so if he's getting a burn and he got a 3rd-degree burn, which is really bad, what was he doing? Why wasn't he wearing personal protective equipment? This would certainly be something that I would want to focus in on if I was doing trend analysis or even an accident investigation to start that process. Why wasn't he wearing a glove? Okay, so you can kind of see where you can kind of use this to kind of help yourself out a little bit. Okay, so anyway, now you could take it, you can see where I put my, thank goodness I didn't have any deaths, but I did have days away from work. So the first 3 that I had were actually days away. You also see where I had 1 that involved job transfer, restricted activity, and you can see where I had just 1 other recordable case. You add those up down there at the bottom, you can see where I put my days away, my restricted or transferred activity. I didn't get close to any of them were near the 180-day mark, but those were all calendar days. You can see where I used the injury rates. I have 3 injuries and 2 illnesses. So the carpal tunnel I counted as an injury, or as an illness rather, and the lower back strain I counted as an illness. Because of the person is loading and unloading all the time, so they're using their back all the time. So I considered that an illness in this situation. And again, it collects all my information across the bottom so that when I go to my 300, it automatically populates this section over here, which is my information as far as how many injuries and everything else like that. So I didn't have to transfer any of that information over. This is what gets posted, remember. I did put in my establishment name, which was Buckman's. I did put in the address, the type of business. I build aircraft maintenance platforms. So I use my standard industry classification and my NAICS code. Now, it took a while to look these up. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of detective work and kind of understand. I'm in manufacturing. I could take it to the next step and kind of look in there, but I had to kind of evaluate as far as what kind of work I did and how it matched up with the NAICS code itself, okay? Annual average of employees, I had 46. The total number of hours in this case that I had was 93,247 hours. And it's important, and I'm going to show, and we're going to talk about that as soon as we get to the next section here as to why I want to track that exact amount of hours, because that's going to help me understand where I place within my industry, okay? And my executive is Branson Miller. He signed the form. This is something that, again, I post from the 1st of February to the end of April. Now, one of the things to keep in mind here that I also want to bring up when we're talking about numbers, if I have an injury that happens this month and they miss 60 days, either restricted or transferred activity or days away, I don't create another slot in my next year's injury form. I go back and I add it on to this injury form to the point that they get 180 days. If you put it on next year's form, now you've taken that injury and you've doubled your injury rate again, because this year it counts, next year it counts. It only counts for the year of the injury. You don't continue to add it on each year that you have more activity on it. All right, so you always go back to the year of the injury. If you honestly feel that that was an injury picking up the pencil, and then so be it, that's an injury, okay? Now, but it might depend too if the doctor's looking at it and the doctor comes back and the information you get back from maybe the claims examiner or something is that he's looking at this as more of an illness, then you probably want to change that on your format, okay? You can also use your work comp. If work comp decides to decline because they don't think it's work related. Now, if they decline because it wasn't reported within the right amount of time period, that has nothing to do with whether you can put it on whether you can take it off your 300 or not. But if it was considered not work related and the doctor says it's not work related, that gives you a reason for taking it off your 300. Don't erase it off of your 300, okay? Don't white it out. Don't do any of that kind of nonsense. Just take and put a mark through it, just line through it, okay? And take the numbers out for that, okay? Because you don't want to, OSHA always looks at things suspiciously when they see white out and they see people trying to take this out and everything else like that. Just leave it in there, line through it so that they know that you had it, you tracked it, you marked it, and you got information that later determined that it was not work related. For Sarah Jane Dixon, I put the information in there. You'll notice it contains about the same information as the first report, with the first report probably having more because they're tracking wages and things like that OSHA doesn't track. However, I listed out, they wanted the name of the physician. I gave them my physician. I transferred all that information, so if you take a look at this, again, I just filled out the form as completely as I could, and I kept it very short and sweet when it came to the accident description. So in this particular case, the reason she fell, a driver came in with snow on their feet, they kicked it off, snow melted, became water on the floor, she was walking by, slipped on the floor, landed on her arm, broke her arm. So concrete floor the impact with the concrete floor is what caused the injury, okay? Or what caused her arm to be, the injury itself, not what caused the accident, okay?